How would you like to get more of what you really want? You know, how many times have you wanted to ask for something, but you didn't get it, or you're afraid to ask for it? Or let me just say it another way. You ever been held hostage? What happens if somebody puts a gun to your face and says, your money or your life? What are you going to say? I don't have any money? So anyway, today we have a very, very important guest. He is an former FBI negotiator.
Like the top FBI negotiator.
And he deals with guys who hold people hostage. I mean, it's all about communication. We also have Blair Singer, who teaches the art and science of presentation, sales, and how to get what you want, how to get people to buy from you rather than reject you. And so it's going to be a very, very important show. More importantly, how to get what you really want, but also how to get what you want when you're afraid that you might not get it. Any comments, Kim?
Yes. Well, Chris Voss, who's here by phone, he's not just a negotiator. He was the lead international kidnapping negotiator for the FBI. And he has some incredible stories. And what better person to learn about negotiation from and how to get what you want than somebody who's been out in the field doing it for so many years and in unbelievable circumstances. He's actually been 24 years with the Bureau and has a book, a great, great book out. I'm just so impressed with this book. It's called Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended Upon It.
So before I go on, Blair, what do you want to learn from Chris today?
Well, I want to learn how to deal with the scenario when your emotion is running high and your intelligence goes low.
Like your 15-year-old.
Like when you want to crush them, or they're holding out. If you don't do this, I'm going to do that. Or that whole scenario when you just have exercised every option and you reach a roadblock and then your emotion takes over. How do you stay calm and be able to negotiate it properly? That's what I want to
You mean when your son says, I'm going to drop out of school and become a rock and roll singer or something like that?
Please, don't get me started.
Or how about when you get bumped off an airline?
Yeah.
Emotions run pretty high.
Yeah.
And they don't really care.
Yeah.
That's right.
Or how do you handle it when somebody's lying right to your face? How do you just stay calm? So welcome to the program, Mr. Chris Voss.
Welcome,
hey,
Chris.
I'm here. You guys are a great crew. I'm happy to be on.
We're happy to have you on.
So before we begin, can you just start by telling us a story, a real life story about one of the negotiation tests, a trial that really tested your whole beingness?
Well, there was this one with my son one time.
That's my man.
The funny part about this is, the stuff that I did in hostage negotiation, we've been putting right into business and personal life. And exactly the same one, one of my favorites from the book is, I negotiated with a terrorist in the Philippines. I was coaching a negotiation. $10 million for an American citizen or they kill him. We, $10 million, not just ransom, but war damages. And we summarize it. It's a simple skill. It's we Stephen Covey'd them. We that's righted them. We did, we black swanned them. And what do I mean by that? Covey said, seek first to understand, then be understood. Well, how do you know if you understand the other side? They say that's right to you. So I coached my negotiator. Look, just get this terrorist. And believe me, this was a head-chopping, sociopathic, egomaniacal terrorist leader. Get this guy to say that's right. Let's summarize everything he says. Get him to say that's right. And watch what happens.
Because what is that? Why would you do that? What does that mean? What that's right? Why is that important?
I can't explain all the brain science behind it. But you can use empathy with the terrorist. I know it sounds like sympathy for the devil. But,
empathy with the terrorist.
I have little Rolling Stones playing in the background, but you use empathy actually to break through the other side's barriers. It hits them in a portion of their brain that's unguarded. And they're unguarded in their emotional part of the brain. That's where decisions come from. So when you get a that's right out of somebody, you basically kind of sun zoom. You hit them where they don't expect to be hit. And this guy literally said on the phone to us, "That's right."
What did he say? That's right to?
They wanted $10 million for this American because of 500 years of oppression, from the colonial powers, from the Spanish to the Japanese to the Americans. Violation of fishing rights, economic damages for over 500 years, which of course is all nonsense. And nobody out there ever had to negotiate with anybody that was spewing nonsense at them in their personal life, were they?
You mean my ex-wife? Yeah, I know that.
Or the guy who wants the raise, or the vendor who wants more money. So repeat it all back to him. Summarize it. And that's what I told my guy. I said, summarize everything, the world according to a bad guy. Get him to say that's right. And everybody says, well, what's that going to do? I said, just do it. Like the Nike slogan, just do it. So we went from $10 million to zero in one conversation.
You just listed his grievances or his complaints or his point of view?
Yeah, you know what? It sounds stupid, doesn't it?
No.
It sounds amazingly dumb, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, you talk about in your book, because you mentioned empathy, Chris, and you talk about empathy as, you're paying attention, you said out of your book, paying attention to another human being, asking what they are feeling and making a commitment to understanding their world. You're not agreeing with them, but you're letting them know you understand.
Without saying, I understand.
Is that right?
Both those. That's right.
I gotcha.
Right.
No, but
We're practicing on you.
Quick learner.
When I was reading I didn't read the whole book when I was going through it. Nothing really bugs me when somebody says, I understand, and they don't understand. It just infuriates me even worse.
Yeah.
So when you said, just don't say understand, you really should listen and understand, or at least without saying I understand. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and the thing I understand is what people say when they really mean, please stop talking, I want to talk now.
Yes. Yes.
It's as bad as yes, but.
Throughout your book, Never Split the Difference, these are negotiation skills that you learned, of course, in the FBI, but now you're transferring them over into business and personal lives. So let me just bring up one, because we've all heard it. And we all think we do it, but probably most of us don't do it. All about listening. And you say listen with the mindset of discovery. Listening. What is your distinction on listening that most of us don't have?
First of all, most of the time, most people, if they listen at all, it's so they could do an aha, and they go, aha, you're wrong. But I've been pretty lucky while I've been teaching at USC, University of Southern California. One of my guests is Ned Colletti, who's a former GM for the Dodgers. Phenomenal guy. He took him from worst to first, the first year he was their GM. Ned's talking about negotiating with guys like Scott Boras, and he says, Scott will talk for 2 hours, and in the middle of that 2 hours is going to be 90 seconds of solid gold. You don't get that solid gold if you're not silent, if you're not listening for it, if you haven't got a discerning listener's ear. And that's what you're listening for. You're listening to the solid gold that's going to make all the difference in a conversation, or let you know where the deal really is. That's what you're listening for.
So let me ask on the other side, the flip side of that coin, what happens if you have somebody, all they're doing is talking? And there's a lot of those, they just talk. They're not even listening to themselves, I think, some of the time. How do you handle
that? I love that guy because I'll use different hostage negotiation skills, the stuff we teach for business, to make him hear himself. And then to the point where they suddenly get a quizzical look on their face, like, did I really just say that? And those are very control-oriented people, which actually the secret to getting the upper hand is giving the other side the illusion of control. So I let that guy think he's in control, and pretty soon I'm steering the conversation where I want it to go.
Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Our guest today is Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference, and he's talking about one of the most important business skills, personal skills, marital skills, family skills you can have, is how do you negotiate with an idiot? With somebody who disagrees with you. And our other guest is Blair Singer, who is my expert on how do you present from the front of the room, but also how you sell one-on-one to somebody. And as Blair always, that old saying goes, salesmanship begins when the customer says no. And then Chris has whole new distinctions of what happens when you deal with a terrorist, somebody who's now out of control, out of reality a lot of the times, and made it a desperate situation.
So Chris, let me ask you about something that's happened recently. United Airlines. dragging that poor passenger off the plane. That was like one major myriad of negotiations that could be happening. What would you have done if you were the person trying to get this guy off the plane? How would you have handled it?
A real great way to break somebody's thought patterns is I ask them questions where the answer is no, but it favors me.
Where they answer no, but it favors you, okay?
Right, because the flip side, the first question is to him would be, do you want to get hurt?
He's going to say no.
Yeah, but and it's critical. You don't say these things as a threat. If you're going to get that guy out of there, instead of any question that you would normally ask, like, do you want to come off here peacefully? You can flip that to a simple no question. Do you want to force us to use violence on you?
Okay.
And just matter of factly, because as stupid as it sounds, you'd be stunned at what people are willing to say no to. Because when you say no, you're in control, you're maintaining control, you're protecting yourself.
Well, I was reading in your some of your feedback in your book here. Most people are trying to get the customer or who the other person to say yes, and you say it's sometimes more effective to get them to say no. Now, what is the psychological or emotional difference between a person saying yes or a person saying no? Like, you use the example of, would it be terrible if I sat in this section here? Or something like that. So instead of saying yes, they can say, no, it wouldn't be terrible.
Well, there's two problems with yes. The first problem is, since yes is commitment, people always worry about what they're letting themselves in for. If I say yes to this, where's this going to go? What's going to happen? So yes, by definition, and creates some anxiety because I don't know what I've left myself in for. The other big problem with yes is, it's so overdone on us that nobody ever asks you. Lawyers call it cornering. Never ask a question unless you know the answer in advance. The answer is going to be yes. Nobody likes to be cornered. If I ask you what day it is, or is today Tuesday, you're worried that I'm taking that someplace. Isn't it true you're in Scottsdale? I'm setting.
I feel like you're being led.
And,
yeah.
Well, Kim and I have this friend of ours. He's a Porsche salesman.
he's the king of yes.
And he took that sales course 101 and never graduated from him. He goes, so, Robert, wouldn't you agree that this car here is the nicest car you've ever driven? And wouldn't you agree? That's what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
Right.
And that is a sales training ploy.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say about that, Blair?
Yeah, I mean, the traditional sales training is just get them to say yes as many times as you can.
And then nod and then train them.
And now that they're already, as you said, Chris, they're committed. They're in a level of commitment, so they actually feel a little bit ashamed if they start to back out after they said yes so many times.
Or I feel uncomfortable that this guy's leading me on. He wants me to say yes. I want to find a way to say no.
Right.
No, it was the Porsche Cayenne when it first came out. This guy he's a good friend of mine, but he said, hey, Steve, you don't have to use your sales techniques on me. Either I like the car or I don't. But wouldn't you agree that, your last Porsche was a really good Porsche? So, Steve, cut it out.
So, Chris, you're saying that by saying no, the person feels more comfortable? They don't feel like they're being set up?
Yeah, it's nuts. It's crazy. I mean, we've experimented with this to ridiculous degrees. I got employees saying to their bosses, do you want me to fail?
Whoa. That's a pretty good question.
Every time.
Wow.
Every time. I mean, you'd be stunned at what people will comfortably say no to. It's crazy.
Wow. So let me ask you this, back to United Airlines for a second. So you're on the one side trying to get the passenger off. Could the passenger have used some of your techniques to negotiate staying on the plane?
Well, this is an interesting question because that situation reminds me of certain sorts of hostage takers when they get backed into a corner. What's the outcome this guy really wants? Like if I'm that passenger, at that point in time, my strongest position is to get drug off that plane. Because in my view, I thought there was a violation of an agreement between the airline and the passenger. In my view, were I the passenger, I'm going to want to get drug off that plane. I'm probably not going to get hurt that bad. And, it's going to be dramatic. People are going to take phones. I mean, the most dangerous negotiation is one you don't know you're in. The airline and the law enforcement officers were in one negotiation. The passengers in a completely different one with completely different stakes.
Interesting.
I think he was the only one that saw what was really going on there, and he saw a different outcome for himself.
Interesting.
What was that? I mean,
That is interesting.
he really wanted to get dragged off?
I mean, if I'm that guy and, dispassionately step back and any negotiation, look at what's really at stake here. Look beyond the next 5 minutes. Take a little bit more long-term perspective. If I'm that passenger, I want to get drug off the plane. I don't want to leave voluntarily.
So, Chris, really quickly, would you give us another kind of a life and death story? Because most of us leave. My most exciting part of the day is watching Jerry Springer. So what?
Now, that's a hostage.
I tell you, they could use your negotiation skills on the Springer show. But anyway, can you give us another real life example of where it was life and death, or money, or the guy was unreasonable?
Yeah, one of my favorites was back in the Philippines again. This time it's just a criminal operation, though. It's a cab driver who's kidnapping people out of his cab. He's putting ether on them and rendering them unconscious and taking them to the basement of his house and ransoming them out. And we get in the middle of this negotiation, and I'm just getting the sense, because this guy's just using the plural pronouns far too much. He won't take responsibility for anything. He's always talking about the rest of the gang, the other guys that are there, who else is in charge. And this is actually a great technique of a lot of very influential people when they come to the table. They don't want to admit they have influence, so they're going to seem like they're completely controlled by people outside of the room, and they use a lot of we, they, and them.
So it's called a limited authority. I'm not responsible.
Yeah. And they don't use I.
Right. Will not use a singular pronoun to save their life. And and in the opposite, the guy or gal at the table who's in love with the words I, me, and my, they don't have a lot of influence on their side, and they're just trying to make themselves feel good at the table. They're trying to magnify their position.
Interesting.
Wow.
So this guy's doing the same thing, and kidnapping is an international business. It's a commodity business. It's just hard bargaining. What does that mean? What that means is they run it like a business. They got negotiators. They got people who control the inventory. They got people who are decision makers. And typically we don't have a decision maker on the phone. And just like a normal business negotiation in many cases, or the guy you got is limited. But this guy we're talking to, he's just doing too many of the plural pronouns. He later turns out to be not just the boss, but he's running a one-man operation, which is the only time we ever encountered that. We just start peppering this guy with, a lot of very well-crafted what and how questions from a deferential point of view. It's usually, how are we supposed to do that? What's going to happen if we can't do it? How's this going to work out? And this guy, he wanted us to pay him little by little while he researched the ransom. So we decide we're gonna get into a bargaining situation over the small payment. And finally, the guy I'm coaching, I get him to say, when we run out of money paying you the small amount, what's going to happen? It's what we call the time travel confrontation. When this happens, what's going to be the outcome? And it was this long silence on the other end of the line. And our killer, and he was a killer, we caught this guy and they made him for several other homicides. He says, it'll be all right. And I'm like, I start almost doing a celebratory Super Bowl dance then, because this guy, we had just got him to say he will never hurt our hostage. And we ended up rescuing him. We rescued him out of the house and arrested our kidnapper.
Wow. And you said something in your story, Chris, because I read this also, is that you ask questions of the negotiator on the other side. How am I supposed to do that? How can I get the money? And you kind of put it back on them. What does that do?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It makes them feel like they're in control, because people love to be asked how to do stuff. And, we use the how question and various forms of it. How are we supposed to pay if we don't know our hostage is going to come out? You start making conditional how questions. The other side feels in control, but you've really boxed them in. They have no idea what you've done to them.
Is there an example that's fairly common in business where that so-called strategy or style works?
Well, the first one is get good and be willing to say in a very kind way, how am I supposed to do that? And be willing to keep saying it until the other side finally does, in fact, say, because you have to. Because what you've just done, when you get good at that how question, you've done the negotiator's job, which is find out how much is there. And you have pushed the other side to just short of their limit and kept them in the deal when they look at you and say, because if you want the deal, you have to do it. Bang, you just met your first goal as a negotiator.
Which is what?
And find out how much is on the table.
Oh, I see. Okay.
If I say to you, what's your budget? Everybody's used to that question.
So we have a good friend. We have a great good friend whose wife's taking him over the coals right now. Could you help him out?
You guys trying to get me to call in a SWAT team? Sometimes you got to call a SWAT team. He's a good friend of ours. He says, I thought we had it all settled. And then she called in another negotiator on him and upped the price again, even after they agreed to the deal. So I said, obviously, she hasn't got enough pain yet out of you. Have you ever seen that where the deal changes? Well, yeah, that happens in business all the time. And when, they change out people. And so that, focused comparison is acceptable. It's another definition for confrontation. It's how to be confrontational without attacking. When somebody does something like that to you, you say this. It looks like you're trying to teach me that I cannot rely upon your agreements.
Ooh, I like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
And that's just an application of a skill that we call a label, which is you're allowed to label to make an observation of whatever dynamic is presented to you in the negotiation. You're not required to ignore it. And when somebody's double dealing you, you say, it looks to me like you're trying to teach me that I can't trust you.
Okay, once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Our guest today is Chris Voss. He's the #1 lead negotiator for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, especially international hostage and ransom negotiations. But like you say, that goes on every day in all of our lives in one way or the other. You need to ask for a raise, you need to buy a car, you need to buy a house and all this. And that's why his book has never split the difference, negotiating as if your life depended upon it. So when we come back, we'll find out from one of the best negotiators of all how to better get what you want.
The Rich Dad Radio Show with Robert Kiyosaki.
Rich Dad Coaching offers a phenomenal variety of services and custom strategies, all aimed at ensuring a secure, comfortable, and rich future for you and your family. Now you can get weekly access to exclusive Rich Dad coaching services through our live stream events. Go to richdad.com and click on the On-Demand banner at the top of the homepage. Great new videos are updated regularly. Get inside knowledge and insights from Robert Kiyosaki himself, Rich Dad coaching professionals, and more. Go to richdad.com and click on the On-Demand banner at the top of the homepage.
This is the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. Here's Robert Kiyosaki.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. The good news and bad news about money. You can listen to our program on Rich Dad Radio anytime, anywhere on iTunes or Android. And all of our programs are archived at richdadradio.com. And we archive them because repetition is how we learn. And this is another program that I think is very important for all of us to learn. It's about negotiation, whether it's in terrorist situation or at work, another terrorist situation, or with your children, your ex-wife, your former husband, and all that other stuff. It's all one big negotiation. And so our guest today is Chris Voss. His book is Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended upon it. And so Chris has already been sharing what's it like to negotiate with real murderers and killers and hostage takers. But as you know, and anybody who's been in real business knows that it's one big hostage situation all the time. So we have Blair Singer here. He is our Rich Dad advisor on sales dogs, but also little voice mastery. He also teaches companies all over the world how to get the customer to sort of buy your product. Right, Blair?
That's right. That's right.
But it's always one big negotiation.
It's a negotiation. And Chris, your information has been fascinating. Can I ask a question now?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah. So you were talking about earlier, before the break, you were talking about when people start to change the deal on you, or they want to divert and change the subject, or they want to get even somehow or other and say, you were a jerk over here, so that's why I need this now. How do you keep them focused and get them on point and get them to stop running around so you can keep them cornered, if that's what you're trying to do?
Yeah, a couple things. Again, the secret to gaining the upper hand is giving the illusion of control, which would get us back to this, how am I supposed to do that? If somebody tries to change things on you in what you're looking at, you can either respond with the label that I talked about earlier, sounds like you're trying to teach me that I can't rely on what you're saying, or you can just look somebody in the eye and say, how am I supposed to do that? And, that really, if you're dealing with a really tough negotiator on the other side or somebody who's really changing up, now you're trying to wear the guy out. Exhausting a difficult adversary is a great skill. They're going to try and exhaust you. That's why they're changing the subject all the time. That's why they're jumping all over the place. That's the guy who tries to wear the car salesman out by spending 3 hours looking at a car he didn't want.
Right. Yep.
How about if somebody says, I'm going to sue you?
Well, my first reaction to that is going to be, sounds like I've offended you.
And that goes back to the labeling. It sounds like. It seems like. It sounds like.
Somebody's saying, threatening they're going to sue you for one or two reasons. It's a manipulation tactic, or they've really been offended.
Okay, so there's one big premise to this whole thing, is when they're saying this, you have to stay calm. What happens when your emotions start coming up and the anger starts coming up and all of that starts coming up? How do you keep that in check?
I'm glad I don't have that problem.
Yeah, you don't have that problem ever.
Not at all.
How do you keep that in check?
Well, there's two ways. Way number one, which just takes some practice, is the more focused you are on the other side's emotions, it compartmentalizes your own brain.
Good.
Like if you're really studying them and trying to say, wow, this person looks really angry right now, it compartmentalizes you out of that portion of your amygdala, your limbic system, where you lose control. Every now and then I do get mad, though.
Mm-hmm.
I get mad. And it gets you into a downward spiral. And then there's a little bit of, reminder. I realize this gratitude is an overused word. But, if I say, I'm lucky, I'm only in this conversation because I'm successful. I'm really kind of lucky to be having this argument. What that actually automatically does, it puts me, a positive frame of mind is 31% more efficient. If I can put myself, gratitude makes you smarter because you're in a positive frame of mind. Now I can navigate much quicker. And that's how I deal with it.
Get the attention off of you. Stop thinking about me. Take a step back. Focus on the other person. Is that?
Yeah. Whatever the percentage of the deals that'll make the deal for you, let the process work for you. I'm greedy. I want to do as little work as possible. This negotiation's been described as the art of letting the other side have your way.
Right.
Well, you got to get them talking. You get them talking, ask them some, how's that going to work? What good is that going to do? The how and what questions again. You get them relaxed enough till they talk, till you hear what you want to hear. Then you look at them and you go, brilliant, that's a great idea.
Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to Chris Voss. His book is a very important book, Never Split the Difference. It's negotiating as if your life depended upon it. And his life and his hostages' lives as the lead negotiator for the Federal Bureau of Investigation has given him insights as to how to negotiate with irrational or unreliable people or people who are hyper-emotional.
You talk about the different voices you use as a negotiator. Can you explain that?
Well, there's a late night FM DJ. And I use that when there's a term in a contract that just got to go. Like my company, we don't do work for hire. And I never say to somebody, you got to take that clause out because that's an order, and there are all sorts of problems with making that statement. So all I do in a late night FM DJ voice is I say, we don't do work for hire. And then I shut up. And they'll come back and they'll say, well, let me go to my lawyers and see if I can get them to take it out. Now I go, brilliant. Because I just got him to say what I needed him or her to say. Not if it's his idea, the chances that it's going to happen are much higher. So I let it be their idea. I go, wow, you're brilliant.
So what happens? What happens when you use the FM late night DJ voice to the other person?
Their brain shuts down.
Why is that?
It's actually the first thing that they teach hypnotherapists when they're teaching them how to hypnotize people.
Oh.
It shuts the brain down.
Sounds like my high school classes. My brain was shut down most of the time. I was sound asleep. So that's one voice. What's the other voice?
Well, it's the relationship-oriented voice. The person who's happy to talk to you. I mean, they love talking to you, and you can feel the energy in their voice. And this actually gets us. It does two things. First of all, it makes you more likable. And there's some good data out there that indicates that you're 6 times more likely to make a deal with somebody you like.
Mm-hmm.
So you increase your deal-making ability just by smiling at people. It increases the chances that they'll speak to you again because they remember that the last time they spoke to you, they're not sure what it was, but they enjoyed the interaction. And there's this ongoing great bundle of benefits of just making a point to smile at people when you talk with them. And that's the second voice.
Good. No.
And there's a third voice.
The third voice is the natural assertive's voice. It's my natural default mode. It's a guy who's direct, says he's guy or gal thinks of themselves as direct and honest, but they're actually talking to them. It's like getting hit in the face with a brick. And it's really counterintuitive. It doesn't do you any good. And those of us that are natural-born assertives, which is about a third of the population, we think we're just being direct and honest, and it just erupts into arguments so much of the time. And, and not taking any political position at all, but a current president of the United States, he's got that reputation, and his daughters just said, look, my dad's just direct and honest. That's all Ivanka says. My dad's just direct and honest. People just don't like it. Well, and that's true.
Yeah.
People don't like it. Ronald, I don't know for sure how much more direct Donald Trump is than Ronald Reagan was, but Ronald Reagan smiled at everybody, and
everybody loved Ronald Reagan. Yeah, so he kind of came across as your positive, playful voice. Yeah.
Yeah, look how far he got with a great communicator.
Happy to talk.
Yeah, same with Clinton. Yep.
Let's say you really hate the other person. You really just hate them. You have no respect. How do you approach? Who do you have to be when you approach that type of negotiation or communication?
Yeah, if I get myself into that mindset, first of all, you can self-label and calm yourself down. And there's scientific data that proves that happens. Like if you say to yourself, I really think this guy's a jerk. I mean, I hate dealing with this guy. That'll actually dial your own negativity down some and help you get in more control. The other part of this is, this tactical empathy approach, it's also, Daniel Goleman calls it cognitive empathy. He says the people that are best at it are sociopaths. Like if I really don't like you, I'm just going to lock into total cognitive, tactical empathy. And I know that I'm really going to have the upper hand the whole time.
So you'll be empathetic.
Yeah.
Just force yourself.
Yeah. I divorce myself. Yeah, absolutely. I don't equate empathy to sympathy. I equate empathy, weaponized, military-grade empathy is a mercenary's tool, and that's what this is about.
Once again, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to Chris Voss, lead international negotiator for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. His book is a must-read for everybody who is in business, married, or with kids.
It's fabulous. Never split the difference, negotiating as if your life depended upon it.
Because we all know I don't know how I know I'm always negotiating with difficult people because I'm such a nice guy. But anyway,
And Chris,
that's your label.
And Chris, you're the founder and CEO of Black Swan Group, and your website is Black Swan Ltd, blackswanlimited.com, and you have a newsletter, correct?
Yeah, we got the complimentary. Comes out once a week. Complimentary means it's free. I had an old friend of mine that used to say, if it's free, I'll take 3. And it's real digestible stuff. They're short articles. You can get through it in about 3 or 4 minutes once a week. The simplest way to subscribe to it is to send a text to 22828 and send the words "That's right," THATSRIGHT, all one word, no apostrophe, no punctuation. The magic phrase "That's right." No spaces and no punctuation to sign up for the newsletter.
22828. Okay,
yeah.
We're going to do that.
That's right.
So Chris, one last tip for our listeners. What is, if you were going to give them the main thing to be a better negotiator, to be able to get more of what you want, what would be the main thing that you want to leave our listeners with?
Let the other side go first. It's like playing rock, paper, scissors, only the other side goes first. Let them go first, and then figure out where you want to go from there.
So if they go scissors first, then you throw the rock at them. Hey, I was kind of hoping that this was the different word, but you used the F word. That's my favorite word, except that
the F word.
Your F word is fair. That's not the same F word I use.
Yeah, you'd be surprised at how often the F-bomb gets dropped in a negotiation. That's not fair.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by fair?
Well, it's...
Be fair, or...
I will use it proactively. I'll say, listen, I want to treat you fairly, because I know deals will get derailed over fairness. And people never say it till they're upset. So I'll say right up front, I'll never say this is a fair offer. I'll say I want to treat you fairly, and as soon as you feel like I'm not, I want you to let me know so that we can stop and fix it. Because at some point in time, somebody's going to say that, I've either say I've given you a fair offer, or more often they'll say I just want what's fair, which is accusing you of being unfair.
Yes, right. Or let's be fair, which sounds like exactly that. You're not being fair.
And it always covers up weakness in position.
We could go on for this forever, and we're out of time.
There's so
it's
much
fascinating.
here, yeah.
Once again, our guest today is Chris Voss, as well as Blair Singer. He's a Rich Dad advisor on sales. And Chris Voss's book is Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as if your life depended upon it, because it really does. It is probably the number one skill, especially in today's world where things are always negotiated.
And to sign up for Chris's newsletter, text 22828 and just type in "That's right."
That's right. Because life is a negotiation. Life is about sales. Life is just how you say things and all this. You can have knowledge, but communication is like the jet engine to knowledge. And so many people leave school with knowledge, but they never learn communication. And that's why they're in trouble, especially in entrepreneurship. They quit their job and they find out they can't sell. Or they can sell, but let's say their job is paying them $10,000 a month, but they can only sell $6,000 worth a month. It's the inability to sell. So that's why we have Blair Singer here as Rich Dad advisor on sales. His book is Sales Dogs, but the other book is called A Little Voice Mastery. And we are about study. So once again, I want to thank Chris Voss. Never split the difference, negotiating as if your life depended upon it. And
if you want to get his newsletter, his website is Black Swan Limited, blackswanltd.com. But he said if you just text at 22828 and write in "That's right," you will have subscribed to his free newsletter. Yes. Highly recommend it.
So thank you all for listening. But this is when the questions come in. But anyway, submit your questions to AskRobert@richdad.com. So, Melissa, what's the first question?
Our first question today, Robert, comes from Bill in Waterford, Connecticut. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I want a raise. How do I get over my fear of asking for what I deserve in salary for my job?
communication is worth studying. So I would get this book, Never Split the Difference, by Chris Voss, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended Upon It, and study the subject. For example, I oftentimes say I'm not a best writing author, I'm a best-selling author. And Kim knows this. When I was writing the book, we were studying a book by Robert Cialdini called Influence. So Kim and I would sit together as, husband and wife, and we'd sit down and we'd discuss how we influence people. And so Rich Dad, Poor Dad becomes the best-selling book, and all the academics say, well, you can't write. I said, well, it doesn't make a difference. I sell more books than you do. Or, another book was called Positioning by Trout and Reese. And you study these books because that's called communication. It's not knowledge. There's a very big difference. Communication is the engine of knowledge. And if you're sitting there wanting me to give you an answer, you're a very lazy person. When I'm telling you this best I can right now, my success doesn't come from my grades. My success comes from my studied great books like Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as Your Life Depended Upon It by Chris Voss. Please hear what I'm saying. Do we study it?
Well, here's
Kim?
the thing. No, we don't just read the book. We go out there. So Robert Cialdini's book is Influence, and we've actually had Robert Cialdini on the show. You can go back to the archives and listen to that show. We took his principles and we went out and we practiced them. We practice them regularly. This is what I'm loving about Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. There are little things in here that we already started practicing after we were reading this. We were practicing it on the radio show. I'm going to practice it. You can practice it at home. We're going to keep practicing these things so they become part of us. We don't just read a book. You got to practice.
So would it be okay with you if you studied this book and you got a lot richer, you got beyond araise, and you became a better? Would that be better for you or not?
Than just araise.
So, yeah. Blair, tell them how much you and I practiced before we became speakers.
Well, we practiced day in and day out. Every week we would lock ourselves in rooms and practice handling objections, practicing presentations, getting
hot questions,
being heckled, until the point where when you go out, when there's real money on the line and there's real feelings on the line, you're prepared.
You're practiced.
You practice. As Kim said, you practice. People will practice their golf game. They'll practice tennis. They'll practice all kinds of stuff, but probably the most important skill in business, which is your ability to communicate, they're not going to practice. Well, I know how to talk, so I know how to communicate, which is crazy. It is probably the best investment you can make in your education in learning how to communicate.
And when I talk to people about how do I become an entrepreneur, I said, the first thing I had to learn to do is from Rich Dad, I had to learn how to sell. So I said, who was the company that did the best sales training? It was Xerox. They sell PSS, professional selling skills. That's what they market. So I worked really hard selling myself into Xerox to get a job just so I could attend Xerox sales training school, beginning, advanced. And even after that, I continued to take classes on how you communicate over the phone, how do you handle hot questions and all this. So that's my long way of saying it. So knowledge is just knowledge, but your communication skills is the jet engine or the fizzle instead of the sizzle that gets you to where you want to go. So I could give you an answer, I could get a raise, but I don't even know if you deserve it. I think that's one of the most stupid words I've ever heard used. I heard it on some TV show. The woman listened, why should we hire you? Because I deserve it. I deserve it. Well, if you really deserved it, you would have been hired. You know what I mean? It's idiots. People are effing idiots. They're fair idiots. So study. Again, the book is Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Paycheck Depended Upon It by Chris Voss. Any question? Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Michelle in Long Island, New York. Favorite book, Midas Touch. She says, I work with mainly an all-male staff. I have a strong personality, no different than the guys on my team, yet I'm always told I need to, quote, tone it down and be less aggressive in my approach. I want my boss to back off and just accept that this is who I am, and it's also what makes me successful. What should I do?
I don't know, but I already feel my hackles being raised right now. Kim, as the only woman on this team, I mean, you hear that all the time, I'm sure.
I hear it a lot. And, there's no simple answer. It actually does go back to the same answer of study and practice, because Michelle could take some of the things out of this book, Never Split the Difference, and start practicing it. Some of the things that Chris was sharing about how to talk to her boss, what she could do, what she could say, she could practice it, because you don't have to compromise who you are, just be who you are. But as long as she thinks that's the excuse for her not getting what she wants in life, that's an excuse. So I think she's using it as an excuse.
Yeah, that's right. I heard an expression once that there's really the problem is inflexible communicators. See, if you don't study how to communicate, then she only has one way to communicate, which is what we're saying on the last question. Study the process. There's different communication modes, different ways, in different scenarios, all of those things that we can't give an answer to here. But if she's concerned about that for herself, then it's probably worth buying a book or two and doing a little bit of study and a little bit of practice.
Yeah. And I think she already knows what her label is. We all know the label, because we've all dealt with women who are BBs, and it's really tough to deal with them because they think it's being a woman, when really what it is not a good communicator. But it's because I'm a woman.
Well, that's an excuse.
That really what it comes down to. So I'll say it again. I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad after reading one book called Influence, but also another book by Trouton Reese called Positioning. And you can see it in my title. He goes, Positioning goes, what the rich teach their kids that the poor and middle class do not. I didn't just come up with that. I studied that. And most people who are in sales and all that don't study. Would you agree with that, Blair?
I agree. They just figure they can wing it, or I'm naturally a good communicator, I'm naturally not. The truth of it is, it's something that everybody needs to study.
And practice. Any comments, Kim?
Oh, just very quickly, another book that we're studying called The Untethered Soul talks about whenever you're upset or disappointed, it's because you've added something to reality. You've added your expectation of what reality is. So she has an expectation. Michelle has an expectation of how she should be treated versus stop thinking about herself, just as Chris Voss was saying, and start looking at the people around and start being, as you said, Blair, much more flexible in your communication.
And I will say again, the Rich Dad Radio Show is not here to give you answers. If you want answers, talk to a financial planner. They'll tell you what to do. Save money and invest in their mutual funds. I mean, what a stupid answer to get. But you'll do that. And here we are, and we say we don't do that because we study. And we study communication. And we study real estate. We study sales. We study legal. We study constantly. And poor people don't study. That's the big difference. So please submit your questions to Ask Robert at Rich Dad Radio. I want to thank Chris Voss for Never Split the Difference. For all of you out there who are willing to increase your communication skills and your success in life, please get his book and study it. Don't read it, practice it.